Hello and welcome to Mostly Sapphic Books, where I am on a mission to read every single book about lesbians. I also have a mini mission to find actually good lesbian vampire books, and I've accidentally found one today. I have just finished reading All the Hearts You Eat by Hailey Piper. I did not know this was a vampire story. If you go to the Goodreads page, the second tag is vampires. It's not a secret. However, I did not read that part. My vetting process for reading books is like go to the Goodreads page, and then I look for the word lesbian, and I saw the tag lesbian and queer and LGBT, and then I didn't read anything else because it doesn't matter. I just see the word lesbian and I go, yeah, I'll read that. I did read the description, and the description mentions ghosts, so I knew this was a horror novel, but I thought it was about ghosts, not vampires. It starts off as a ghost story, and then it turns into vampires. The other reason I read this is because it's a Hailey Piper book. I really like all the Hailey Piper books I've read. I think this is only the third one, actually. I read A Game in Yellow, and then I read A Light Most Hateful, and those were both really good. So this is only the third Hailey Piper book I've read, which feels kind of crazy to say, because if you asked me who my favorite horror authors are, I feel like Hailey Piper would make that list. Even though I've read like 2% of her bibliography, her oeuvre, if you will. She has about 900 books, so I'm looking forward to reading more of them. This was good. I've liked all of her books so far. You will be seeing more Hailey Piper book reviews from me in the future, so subscribe for that. But I didn't know this was a vampire story. Again, it starts out as a ghost story, and I'd argue that these vampires are sort of zombie-esque. It's not quite traditional vampires, the way you'd expect a vampire novel to be. There's a little more to it. There's a little more flavor, a little more fantasy stuff, made up stuff. It doesn't stick to like conventional vampire rules totally. And I like that. I'm fine with that. I think that's a little more interesting. I think we've all seen a bajillion vampire books, and I do like them. I do love a classic vampire story. But this was something a little different. But our basic setup here, we start off following one of our main characters. There's a few main characters. One of them is a trans woman named Ivory. She's about 30 years old. She lives in this sort of beachside town. She is at the beach one morning swimming when the cops show up. A body of a young teenage girl has washed ashore. The police are investigating this death. And Ivory is the one who finds not the suicide note, but the death poem. It's a poem written by this girl, Cabrina Aphrodite Bright, which implies that this is a suicide, but it's not a suicide. Great explanation. She has chosen to die, but the poem specifically says that she doesn't want this to be called a suicide. She has chosen a different kind of death, or even possibly a different kind of life. Right off the shore of this beach is a little island called Ghost Cat Island, where people claim to see ghosts, usually cats. Ivory's on the beach, right in this opening scene. She gets the letter, she sees the dead girl, and she looks out into the distance, and she sees Ghost Cat Island, and she sees the figure of a girl on Ghost Cat Island. And we're like, is that the dead girl? Is she a ghost? And Ivory is also like, is that the dead girl? And then she gets sort of superstitious about it. She can't stop thinking about this girl. She doesn't give the death poem to the police. She sort of wants to respect this girl by not having her words shown. The words feel very private in a way, which they were, but it's interesting. Ivy's a really interesting character, and her motivations surrounding this girl and around this death are really, like, complex. There's a lot to think about here. I really like Hailey Piper books in the way that, like, Hailey Piper doesn't just tell you everything. You could really think about it. And, like, these characters are very complex and, like, interesting and go in different places than you'd expect them to by the end of the book. There's a lot to think about. I think the character work here is really interesting and, like, really nice, and, like, it defied my expectations in a way I really liked. But Ivory becomes haunted by this young girl who was a trans woman. I think she was like 18, 19. She was young. She was also from this area. She had two best friends who are another trans woman and then a trans guy. And the three of them, they all went to high school together. They were a group. They were all kind of in love with each other. It was a whole thing. Again, that was a really interesting relationship dynamic because they were sort of pairing off at different times, like romantically, but they were also so platonically in love with each other, and I don't think really any of them knew whether or not they felt romantically or platonically about them. And it was almost like this sort of latching on to these people. Like Cabrina especially had a transphobic mother and like family life and wasn't allowed to be herself, and so these were the only people who like loved her and respected her and cared for her as her. And so like was she actually in love with them, or was, you know, was she just latching on to like the only people she had in her life and sort of projecting romantic feelings and like intensifying them in a way that in another situation they might not have been. I don't know, it's really complex, like the relationship dynamics here and like the character motivations. But I kind of like I like the thought that they were all in love with each other. I like a good romance, even though one of them is dead now. But I like the hopeful reading that they all would have been in a polycule at some point if they had gotten to live and been in a better situation, perhaps. It doesn't matter. But everyone in this book is trans or queer, bisexual. There's just a lot of queerness. Not everyone, because there are homophobic people, but everyone's gay. These two friends, Rex, the guy, and Z, the girl, are heartbroken to discover Cabrina dead. They don't know if this was a suicide or if it was an accident or like if something happened. They end up meeting Ivory at her grave, and like all three of these people are now haunted by the ghost of this girl. Like literally, like she keeps showing up outside their house and like knocking on windows and shit. But she's also quite solid and not exactly a ghost. Some of these kids are kind of spiritual. Like Rex, he has two moms, and one of his moms like owns a like funky trinket shop for the tourists. Like she's sort of into the spiritualism thing. And so he sort of believes in the ghost stuff, or is like more inclined to explore that path and make it like a spirit board and try to communicate with her. And for a lot of the beginning, it feels like a ghost story. But again, she's quite solid, and she can only come into places where she's been invited in. So there is some like traditional vampire lore here, but eventually they realize that she is kind of like flesh and blood and like out of the grave, and it's not just a ghost story. But then we do have the ghost story of Ghost Cat Island, and Ivory especially feels drawn to this place. She sort of connects with Cabrina. She realizes that Cabrina was this young trans woman, and like that could have been Ivory, or Cabrina could have been her if she had lived longer. And so like she really feels this kinship with this girl and like keeps thinking about her and like investigating her life and like what this death poem means. And she ends up going to Ghost Cat Island. She feels like drawn in her dreams. Again, she's haunted by this ghost vampire girl who only comes out at night and like is like looking at her and haunting her. And she keeps having dreams of this Ghost Cat Island, and she feels compelled to go there. And when she does go there, it's like a mystical place where reality just gets kind of fucked. She goes there at one point, like the first time, and her body changes. Like she has the body of a cis woman now. And then she meets this character there named Honey, who's like a vampire, the sort of like vampire, like older than religion, who knows how old, who knows how immortal, who knows how powerful, has sort of like put this glamour on her. And we find out that Cabrina was also tempted by the allure of this place and like the glamour of it. Glamour in the sense of like a vampire being able to project what you want or sort of like manipulate reality or perception or whatever. And we see Ivory get entrenched in this and get bitten by Honey and sort of like let Honey in. She sort of likes this experience at Ghost Cat Island of meeting this strange woman who doesn't really talk and is like is not very human, but sort of looks human and is kind of hot, but is very freaky and sort of communicates almost telepathically sometimes. It's weird. She's a weird vampire creature. And we see her get drawn into this tale of like an ability to have power that she is not able to have in any other situation. Like Honey can sort of make her a vampire, or make her a thrall at least. She sort of becomes Honey's thrall. Because she's gone to Ghost Cat Island and sort of let Honey in, Honey can come back with her. And then there are like multiple vampires, you know, infesting this area and sort of making new vampires or making new thralls and sort of hive mind connecting people. It gets real weird. There's a good variety of like weird supernatural stuff happening, then you don't really expect any of it. Because again, it doesn't follow like a traditional supernatural creature story arc or like power line. And so there's points where you have like no idea what's gonna happen next, or like who's going to be involved with this, and like how much of the town is going to be involved with this. because it's sort of spreading like an infection, which definitely means something. And we see Ivory get caught up in this mystical thing that gives her power to some extent, or allows her to be seen or like feel her retribution, and like her anger has a place to go now, or like has potential to actually cause change. I don't know how to explain it well. It's mystical. A lot of the supernatural effects in this book are kind of, I don't know, hard to explain. Like, you just kind of feel it. Like, it's interesting. But I feel like this almost defies the traditional vampire arc by making them the bad guys. Because at first you kind of understand Ivory's attraction to this whole thing that's going on, with the power, and with like the body changing, and making your reality what you want it to be. Like, you understand the appeal of that, and you kind of think it's going to go in like a very modern direction, where the vampirism is a metaphor for like a woman finally having power and being able to do things on her own terms, in a world that does not allow her to do that. But then this book like makes them bad people. I mean, they are killing people, and like they are infecting people, and like controlling people and manipulating people. And like, is that the way to live? Is that actually power, or are you giving up power to something else? But you still sympathize with Ivory, even as you're watching her sort of become corrupted and almost become the bad guy. I would say by the end of the book, she's sort of the bad guy. But again, you do empathize with her. You are in her head. You do understand her thought process. You do understand the allure of this, and like how she got to this point and decided to go down this route. And we see the teenagers, Rex and Z, sort of rebel against her, which was interesting because at the beginning of the book, they're sort of all on the same side. Like, they're sort of all on Cabrina's side. Cabrina didn't have a lot of people on her side in her life. She really struggled with, like, her mother is a local politician, very transphobic and repressing and not good. And she didn't have a very good home life. And so we're rooting for her two best friends, and then this stranger who feels this kinship to this girl she's never met, and can sort of understand what she was going through in some ways and sympathize with that. But at the end of the book, like, you realize Ivory did not know Cabrina. Like, this is a complete stranger to her, and she has like no real business being involved in Cabrina's life like this, and like talking to Cabrina's friends, or like talking to Cabrina's mom. Ivory wants to understand more about what happened to Cabrina, and she's looking for Cabrina's diary, which we get entries from Cabrina's diary throughout the book. We get Cabrina's perspective, Ivory's perspective, Rex's perspective, Z's perspective. So we get all of these people's perspectives, which really helps in like fleshing them out and making us understand their points of view. But Ivory's really looking for Cabrina's diary because she wants to know like Cabrina's connection to the ghost thing, the vampire Ghost Cat Island thing, and like understand her own connection to Ghost Cat Island through that. But really, she doesn't have a connection to Cabrina. She is a complete stranger, and Cabrina's friends are like, who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you to intrude on this young girl's life in this tragedy? And that was really interesting because I didn't expect it to go there. Like, yeah. But also, like, I understood, like, why Ivory connected to Cabrina. And, like, you can sort of envision the two of them being friends or having a sort of mentor-mentee kind of relationship. There's a bit of an age gap here. I think Ivory's, like, 30 and Cabrina's, like, 19. So you absolutely understand why Ivory felt drawn to this girl. But then you also absolutely understand why her friends are like, who the fuck are you? I think Hailey Piper defies a lot of expectations here and like plays with what you as the reader think. Like, when we read a book, we're rooting for the protagonist, like, most of the time. 9.5 times out of 10. We find our protagonist, we enter the book with them, and we're like, okay, this is our guy. We're on their side. We believe what they say. We trust their point of view. We trust that they're probably the hero, and they probably have the best in mind, at heart, you know? They're gonna go on this journey, and we're gonna go with them, and we're gonna root for them. And that's not necessarily the case here. We have a sort of sympathetic anti-heroine. But then even the kids themselves aren't perfect. They kind of become heroes of the story at time, but, I mean, they're kids. And they also don't know what's going on, totally. It's just really interesting. It's really deep and, like, complex. That's what I'm going to describe this. Complex. I feel like this would be a great book club pick, because I feel like everyone could read something different into it, or like pick up on different themes, or like resonate with different characters differently. I felt the same way about A Light Most Hateful, which is like, I don't want to say like open-ended. It is sort of open-ended in a way, or like vague in like some of its messaging, or it makes you, the reader, do the work to sort of work out what you want to work out of it. And I don't think like Hailey Piper is shoving one interpretation of the story absolutely down your throat and making you believe that this was exactly what I was trying to say. That's the only thing you're going to get out of it. I think it is sort of left up to reader interpretation in a lot of ways of like what these things represented. Like this infestation of the vampires sort of wreaking havoc on the city. And how that wouldn't have happened if the world just wasn't transphobic. If there just weren't transphobic people, these poor trans kids wouldn't have been inclined to seek acceptance in the only place that would give it to them, which was like the Devil's Lair. And because they rejected these people, it was their downfall. It was everyone's downfall. That was kind of the way I was reading it. Sort of simplistic, it feels like a sort of surface level interpretation of that. I feel like a lot of people could read this in a lot of different ways, and I don't think any of them would necessarily be wrong. I mean, all art is subjective. You can get anything out of anything, even if you are, like, wrong, and the author did not intend that at all. I'm sure someone could read this book and be like, all the trans people went to Devil Island, and then we all died. We shouldn't have trans people. And I don't think that's what Hailey Piper was going for. So, I mean, you could read any book anyway. There probably are wrong interpretations. But I don't know that there's necessarily a correct interpretation. I don't know, like, if there was, like, one specific thing Hailey Piper was really thinking about. I think she's really good at doing that sort of vague posting. Vagary. Open-endedness quality to her work that allows you, the reader, to think a lot. And I like that. It makes me feel, like, respected as a reader. You know what I mean? Like, she trusts us to assign meaning to her work, if that makes sense. I think with a lesser author that wouldn't work, because if this was poorly written, it could read like the author wasn't trying to say anything, or like they didn't know what they were trying to say and they made it vague, so it's like, you know, it's whatever you think it is. But Hailey Piper's such a good writer that I'm like, oh, this is smart. She's trying to say something. She really means something here, and I don't quite know what it is, but that's because she's smarter than me, and I just have to work for it. So because the prose is good, there's an inherent trust in the author, and trust in the abilities of the author, the capabilities of the author. I will say that at times this did feel like maybe she was just writing whatever came to mind next, because again, it starts out as a ghost story, and then it turns into vampires, and then we're into sort of like zombie kind of territory almost. It does feel like, I don't know how much of that was planned. This is a pretty long book too. I saw some reviews complaining about that. It's just under 450 pages, which is pretty long. It didn't feel that long to me while I was reading it. I was having a good time. But it is pretty long. And, like, objectively, you probably could cut some of the fat here. If you had, like, really outlined this beforehand and, like, stuck to just the important plot beats, maybe you could simplify this down, pare it down a bit. I do get the sense that Hailey Piper was just fucking writing. She was just going. But I admire that in an author. Hailey Piper has about 900 books. I feel like she must sit down and just fucking write. Just fucking go. And just write and write and write. It's like, okay, on to the next book. Write and write and write. So maybe she is sort of, I don't want to say stream of consciousness, because it's not that, like, it's not that flowy and, like, airy and, like, poorly edited or anything like that. But I do feel like she's just going. She's just trusting her gut, maybe. Following an instinct. Just following a story. I don't know, actually. I'd be interested in, like, listening to some Hailey Piper interviews and hearing about her writing process. Because I feel like she just fucking goes. Because she writes so much. And to write that much, I don't know if, like, she plans her books out in advance. Maybe she does. Maybe she does do meticulous planning. And that's how she's able to get through all these books. But I feel like she just sits down and writes like she's running out of time. Can I make Hamilton references? Is it, are we past that? I will say if I had to put money on it, I'd say that this wasn't like super planned out in advance, which isn't like a problem. A lot of authors don't plan out books in advance. They just kind of write where the story takes them. Maybe this could have been pared down like shorter. Like if I think about all of the plot points of like what happened, that doesn't necessarily feel like a 450 page book, but it was a 450 page book. So maybe there's some fat to trim in there. But I enjoyed it, and it's well written. And Hailey Piper's just like so naturally talented that it doesn't feel like filler. Like it feels like it's fun to read because the descriptions are so beautiful. And like the prose and the ideas are so like, I don't know, I keep saying vague. That's not a good way to describe it, but it's so, I keep saying open-ended as well. There's gotta be some better adjectives that I can't find. But there's like so much potential here and like possibility and like you just want to linger in the world and think about it. And so like any more writing just like gives you more things to dwell on. And I like that. If you like Hailey Piper's writing style, I don't think you'll mind that this is a 450 page book when it probably doesn't need to be. But maybe if you don't like the writing style, you'll be mad that this is a 450 page book. Does it feel slow? It didn't feel slow to me, to be honest. It didn't. I don't think it was necessarily the fastest paced thing I've ever read in my life. But it's kind of like dreamy and supernatural and like you don't know what's happening. And you're just trying to like, you're just along for the ride trying to figure it out with these characters. So I didn't mind that. I don't need it to be the most fast paced, like pristine, meticulously thought out, beat for beat, like straightforward kind of thing. I like the airy, supernatural quality of it all. I kind of want to reread this because I feel like there were things I missed or like hints. There's not like twist, but like I didn't expect vampires right from the beginning, and I bet if I went back I'd notice like more vampire imagery instead of just ghost imagery. There's something in Cabrina's diaries that she was sleeping with an older man, or maybe not sleeping with him, but was talking to an older man who smelled like cinnamon. And I immediately just assumed that was Ivory's boyfriend, who is an older man named Wolf, who is not a very good person. He's a shitty chaser, basically. And so I assumed that he was, Cabrina's mystery cinnamon man. And she even says, like, he gave me his name, but I think it was a fake name. And Ivory even points out that, like, I don't know that his name is Wolf, so I'm assuming that was the same person. I don't actually remember if we get an explicit reveal there. I might have forgotten. Or maybe it didn't tell you and you're just supposed to figure it out because it seems pretty likely. The boyfriend kind of reminded me of the boyfriend in You Weren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White. Not that bad. Not like that abusive or like not that on page textually abusive. He's sort of like a man. He's a good Christian man and he's sleeping with these trans women, but only like sleeping with them, not like committing to a relationship. He really only sees them after hours if he's looking to hook up. And it's not just Ivory. There's other women involved. This is the crier. This is the town crier. Sorry if you heard her crying. This book also reminded me of Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. And that's probably because the epigraph of this starts with a quote from Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt, which is a bold choice. Because I've compared books on this channel to Alison Rumfitt before. Like other horror novels, trans horror novels, that sort of remind me of that. But that just aren't as good, because Alison Rumfitt's really fucking good. I think this was the most successful at sort of being similar to that. At the very beginning, I was concerned that Hailey Piper was like trying too hard to emulate that book. You can definitely see some comparisons, but it's not like a ripoff of that at all. This felt like a Hailey Piper book. At first I was concerned that she was going to try to write an Alison Rumfitt book, and I don't think any of us are ever going to write an Alison Rumfitt book, sadly. I also wish I could write as good as Alison Rumfitt. But I think Hailey Piper wrote a Hailey Piper book, and I think that's good. I think it's dealing with a lot of the themes of Alison Rumfitt's work, but I mean a lot of trans horror is dealing with those themes, you could argue. And so I don't think it's like directly supposed to be like a response or a copy of Tell Me I'm Worthless. But I could see the influence, and that's fair. What a great book to be influenced by, to be fair. But if I had to compare this to one book, it would be A Light Most Hateful, which is another Hailey Piper book. So it feels like Hailey Piper. That's good. And I like Hailey Piper. I'll be reading more Hailey Piper. I was reading this while my entire like social feeds were people at BookCon, and Hailey Piper was there doing a queer horror panel with Andrew Joseph White. That looked cool. I wish I had some FOMO looking at all the BookCon people who got to go to queer horror panels. But then I also saw a bunch of the lines and like the bathroom lines, and I'm like, never mind. I don't want to pay to wait in line at the BookCon bathroom, so I'm good. I'll just watch some Hailey Piper interviews on YouTube or something later. There must be a few, because she has, again, 900 books. Not literally, but like she writes a lot of books. That's crazy. I do want to know more about Hailey Piper's writing process, so I'll be looking into this author more. I really like her work. I gave this like 4 stars. I debated, I was like a 4.5. I was debating a 5 at some point. Do I give it 4.5 and round up? I think I'm gonna go with like a 4. I don't think this was like my favorite book from her. I think I like Most Hateful more, and I think maybe also A Game in Yellow more. But this is really good. It's like right up there. But I think maybe it is a little long. If I think about it, all those negative reviews convinced me. This has a low rating. It has like a 3.29 on Goodreads, which is too low. It does not deserve a 3.29. People don't have taste. I've discovered that, actually. Reading is an objective experience, and if you don't have the exact same viewpoint as me, you're just wrong. So, like, what are you doing? But I like this. I really like queer horror. I love trans horror. I think trans people are writing, hands down, the best horror right now. I understand why. Unfortunately, they are well equipped to understand the horror genre, especially like body horror. That makes sense. That might be unavoidable, but some of the other horror aspects are avoidable, and yet. Right now, trans horror is like one of my favorite genres. And Hailey Piper's written about a bajillion books in that genre, so shout out to Hailey Piper. That's rad as hell. I admire that so bad. I wish I could write 900 books a year like Hailey Piper. I wish I was Hailey Piper. I wish I were that cool and that smart and that talented and that prolific. Shout out Hailey Piper. Go read a Hailey Piper book. Good night.